Hello and welcome to The Top Story, the podcast with the headlines of the day from our correspondents around the world. I'm Qi Zhi. Coming up in this edition, a White House official says President Donald Trump has suspended all military aid to Ukraine. The Israeli Prime Minister has threatened Hamas with consequences if it doesn't return Israeli hostages held in Gaza. And China's top political advisory body has started its annual session in Beijing. First, in North America, U.S. President Donald Trump has paused all military aid to Ukraine. A White House official says the U.S. is reviewing its aid to ensure that it is contributing to a solution. Speaking earlier at the White House, President Trump suggested that Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky would not be around very long if he did not reach a ceasefire deal with Russia. Zelensky said in his evening address that Ukraine needs security guarantees for a real and fair peace. Meanwhile, Russia said Zelensky needs to be forced to make peace after his clash with Trump at the White House. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov says the public row between the two presidents in Washington demonstrated the difficulty of reaching a settlement with Ukraine. People from across Europe have shared their concerns, hopes and frustrations about the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Growing geopolitical uncertainty has put the continent on the spot, particularly with the Trump administration's apparent apathy towards things far from its home turf.
I think it's unbelievable how much human personalities and importance of behavior of each human is put in front of the benefit for countries and people as a whole. So I think it's not a good situation, and we should look more holistically at the good of the world instead of the good of some leaders.
I'm worried. I was born in Ukraine, but I live here. I'm adopted. And yes, I am worried because I thought that he would maintain defense, but now I'm not sure about it. And I think also Europe is threatened by Trump, so I think it will be so difficult.
They showed us what we really deserve, a show, and we got the show. They put us on the place, on the side trail. What is going to happen, we don't know, but we will follow the news. I can't wish for anything. This is out of my power. I'm just following the news. I read, I listen. I'm not even thinking what is going to happen because I don't have any influence on that. So I'm just following. Otherwise, it is waste of my mental space.
Europe must be strong. Europe must put up a fight. Europe must show that it is united. The worst thing is if we all try to show our national character, just as Germans, just as Hungarians, or whatever. We must stand together as Europe and show that we are one.
Those were members of the European public sharing their thoughts on the Russia-Ukraine crisis. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says Canada will impose 25% tariffs on U.S. goods from Tuesday if U.S. President Donald Trump's administration proceeds with these planned tariffs on Canadian products. President Trump has confirmed that 25% tariffs on imports from Mexico and Canada will take effect on Tuesday. Mexico's president said her country will wait to see until Tuesday, adding that backup plans are in place. Trump claimed that the tariffs are designed to force his two neighbors to intensify their fight against illegal immigration and drug trafficking. Analysts say the tit-for-tat tariff measures between the U.S. and Canada are sending economic shockwaves all across North America. They're also warning that these protectionist acts could threaten global prosperity and long-term interests. Dan Williams reports.
Despite the freezing cold weather, Ottawa locals were out in force, enjoying a morning of ice skating along the city's canal. But for most people here and across Canada, the focus is on the impending US tariffs. The US President Donald Trump has threatened a 25% tariff on all Canadian goods, other than oil, which will have a 10% tariff. Trump cites border security as the reason for the tariffs, saying not enough was being done to stop the flow of undocumented migrants and drugs into the US. Allegations Canada denies. The tariffs due to commence on February the 4th were paused just hours before they took effect. If the US tariffs on Canada are imposed, as well as the likely counter-tariffs, most experts agree it would be devastating for the Canadian economy and would likely plunge the country into a recession. But some economists suggest it is a time to reflect and focus on building a more diverse economy.
As Canadians, we've maybe been a little too lackadaisical in terms of building a country that is resilient, because there are plenty of other countries in the world, in Europe, for example, and in Asia, where they don't particularly have the same attitude with regards to putting up tariffs that the Americans seem to have right now. And if we're able to diversify our business, it'll in some ways insulate us from the sort of craziness that we're dealing with right now.
The tariff threat has at times boiled over. At sports events, both nations have booed each other's national anthems. For many Canadians, there's still a hope that the US will put the new tariffs on hold, just as it did a month ago.
My hope is they come to their senses and remove trade barriers. My message is look for a better hammer rather than this huge destructive hammer.
A tranquil scene here in the Canadian capital on the eve of what could become a full-blown trade war between the two countries, who are each other's largest trading partners. Canadian businesses are already weighing their options. A recent survey by the global accounting firm KPMG shows nearly 90% of Canadian companies are discussing the possibility of shipping their products elsewhere.
That was Dan Williams on the trade tensions between Ottawa and Washington. Turning to the Middle East, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has threatened Hamas with what he called unimaginable consequences if it doesn't return Israeli hostages held in Gaza. Netanyahu also publicly thanked the US for its support. The first phase of the Gaza ceasefire deal ended on Saturday, with talks on its future still at an impasse. UN humanitarians said food prices had hit record high after Israel blocked humanitarian aid into Gaza. Jonathan Regev reports from Tel Aviv.
Well, first of all, I think it indicates that at least Benjamin Netanyahu has learned the lesson from what happened to President Zelensky last Friday at the White House. You do thank the American administration if you wanted support and you make it publicly. Benjamin Netanyahu clearly would not want to get the same treatment when he arrives to the White House. So a very thankful message to the American administration. And Israel is completely standing by the proposal from Steve Witkoff, from the American envoy, saying that this is the path that Israel wants to go through, meaning an extension of the first phase of the ceasefire and more hostages being freed. According to that proposal, half of the hostages left, both alive and not alive, will be freed on the first day. This is something that Israel, of course, would love to see. But, of course, Israel is not alone here. There's another side, that is Hamas, of course. And what Hamas is saying is that you, Israel, have committed to go into the second stage once the first stage is over. The first stage is now over. Everybody lived up to their commitments of the first stage. Whereas the second stage, Hamas is asking, the one in which Hamas frees all the hostages, but Israel withdraws completely from the Gaza Strip, that is nowhere to be seen. So as much as Israel would like to see Witkoff's plan proceeding, the other side, for the moment, is disagreeing.
That was Jonathan Regev in Israel. At the United Nations, Denmark has taken over the presidency of the UN Security Council this month. The country's UN ambassador has already been forced to dodge questions about US President Donald Trump wanting to own Greenland. Trump has expressed interests in acquiring the autonomous Danish territory, claiming it's critical for US national security. Mitch McCann reports from New York.
Denmark last held the presidency of the United Nations Security Council 20 years ago, and Monday its ambassador said the country was resuming the role at a critical time for international peace and security. In her introductory briefing to the press, Denmark's permanent representative to the UN, Christina Marcus Lassen, was asked about President Trump's comments about acquiring Greenland. The ambassador said Greenland may wish to become fully independent of Denmark, but inferred Trump will play no role in deciding that.
Greenland, of course, belongs to the Greenlanders, and that's why the future of Greenland is really for the people of Greenland to decide. Independence is possible. Greenland is currently and has been for centuries an integrated part of the Kingdom of Denmark. It was also endorsed by the UN General Assembly, actually back in '54. But certainly, if the Greenlanders decide so, that in that case, independence is possible and they have the right to self-determination.
The Danish ambassador was also asked about the situation in Gaza, where she reiterated Denmark's desire for peace, emphasising that both Hamas and Israel must change their approaches immediately.
We think it's regrettable that it seems that Hamas is apparently rejecting the extension of the first phase of the ceasefire. But it's also important to say that the Israeli announcement to block humanitarian assistance or emergency aid is basically very problematic. Access to humanitarian aid should never be politicized or become a means of pressure.
Last month, China headed the rotational presidency of the UN Security Council. China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi called for improving global governance and building consensus on multilateralism. The Council also oversaw the first adoption of a resolution on Ukraine, urging an end to the conflict with Russia. The first Security Council meeting with Denmark assuming its role as president will focus on peace and security in Africa.
That was Mitch McCann reporting from New York. In Africa, in South Sudan, home to the world's largest wildlife population, the government is looking to address the renewed threat of poaching. Conservationists say more resources are needed to protect the country's flora and fauna. Patrick Oyet reports.
At the Nimule National Park, near the border with Uganda, some suspects are apprehended with game meat.
I always sell fish. This time when I went to get more supply, I did not get the fishermen. Instead, I got people selling game meat, and since the price was fair, I bought the meat to come and sell and get money to pay my children's school fees.
Poaching has become common in national parks and game reserves across South Sudan. In another part of the country, near the border with Ethiopia, authorities have seized more game meat from suspected poachers.
There are some hot spots, like the poachers and name the rest. There are the challenges that we are facing here on the ground. Also, we want to identify the areas of challenges, the hot spots, so that we deploy additional forces so that to prevent and protect and conserve the wildlife on these sites.
Game parks and reserves are manned by just a few poorly paid security officers. These forces last received their salaries a year ago.
The civil war which raged in South Sudan between 2013 and 2018 led to proliferation of small arms and light weapons.
Some of the guns are now used to kill wildlife for illegal trade. The civil war also triggered an economic crisis which has led to food shortages. For many here, bushmeat is the only reliable source of food.
We cannot stop them in one day because this has been a habit for a long time to them. But if we come together and find a solution of how to reduce the number of poachers, then it will be a very good opportunity for us to improve what they are doing.
The protection of wildlife here is at crossroads. Authorities say they need more resources for conservation. They warn that without that, some animal species like the Mongala gazelle, which are majorly targeted by poachers, might become extinct.
That was Patrick Oyer reporting. Finally, in Asia, China's top political advisory body has started its annual session in Beijing. More than 2,000 members are attending the third session of the 14th National Committee of the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference. They will provide advice on major national policies and key issues, including economic, political and social development. On Wednesday, China's top legislature, the National People's Congress, will open its annual session. Daniel Arap Moy, a correspondent based in Nairobi, Kenya, shares his observations when covering the two sessions.
The first thing that I actually saw when I came to Beijing, well, this is my first time covering the two sessions, and the first time being in Beijing as well, the capital, seeing the opening of the CPPCC. And I saw the way, the Chinese government tries so much to make sure that the people on the grassroots are actually included in the lawmaking process, in the agenda of the country, through oversight work, they go to the people, try to make them get involved in the process, get their views, of what they need, from healthcare to good livelihoods, the entire way of life of the people of China. So they're being included in the political process, in the work process of the committee, trying to get their idea, what they want for the future, what they want for the betterment of their lives, which I actually thought this is very, very unique to me. It is something that I would actually replicate if I'm a member of parliament for my village, for instance, getting the people involved in the lawmaking process, which I think is very important. Another thing that actually struck me is the modernization process of China. This is the way life is supposed to be. People are supposed to be happy in the countries where they live, and this is what I see the government of China is trying to do, to improve the livelihoods of the people. And one thing that is so important is the infrastructure development. Of course, livelihoods, without a good infrastructure development, you cannot have good livelihoods. So this entire process, I see, is very important. And then the culture itself. We were in Hangzhou, and we interacted quite with the locals over there. And the culture, the history of the people of China, how it is being preserved is very, very important. And it's something that really interested me so much.
That's Daniel Aramoy reporting. Recapping the headlines before we go, a White House official says President Donald Trump has suspended all military aid to Ukraine. The Israeli Prime Minister has threatened Hamas with consequences if it doesn't return Israeli hostages held in Gaza. And China's top political advisory body has started its annual session in Beijing. And that's it for this edition of The Top Story, a podcast that brings you world headlines every weekday. For more news in politics, business, sports and culture, you can subscribe to the Beijing Hour, a one-hour podcast news magazine program. We welcome and appreciate all ratings and reviews. I'm Qi Zhi. Thank you for listening.